Welcome back to the Ojai Festival 2017. I'm Steve Smith, Director of Publications at National Sawdust in Brooklyn. And with me is someone who needs no introduction, but we'll get one anyway. Flutist extraordinaire, entrepreneur, ensemble member, founder of the International Contemporary Ensemble, in 2012 a MacArthur Grant recipient, and just in 2017 winner of the Avery Fisher Prize, and a friend of mine for some time now. Claire Chase, thank you for joining us here in the interviewer's seats.
Such a pleasure.
You are having a busy festival. Claire literally just came off of a very, very intense rehearsal back on the stage that you can see behind us, and she'll be going into tonight with a number of performances. She has been in many performances already, and one of those performances was something that she held down all by herself. I should tell you before I go any further what you've just been watching, though, because that's some pretty special stuff too. You saw video playback from this morning's Daybreak concert with an American premiere and 2 world premieres by the flutist and composer and former AACM president Nicole Mitchell. And then following that, you saw some excerpts from a 2015 concert when Steve Schick was the music director here. Again, Claire was involved in some of that program, and we'll be seeing a little bit more of it later. So a lot of music by Edgar Varese, as well as Carlos Chavez's Toccata for Percussion, and a wonderful cantata by Alberto Ginastera. So that's what you've been watching just for the past little while. We're going to talk to Claire now about the piece Density 21.5, a seminal flute work by Edgar Varese and the start of a very long journey, I believe.
Indeed. Yeah, I fell in love with the piece when I was a teenager. Heard it played by my childhood flute teacher, John Fonville. To this day, one of my musical heroes. And he brought these 2 pages of music into my flute lesson. And I looked at it and thought, this looks so strange. It doesn't even look like music. Mm-hmm. And he proceeded to play it for me and completely blew my mind. And I became so obsessed with the piece that I tried to program it on my junior high school graduation. I think I've told you this story before.
Right.
Yeah, and I was not permitted to play it on that public school, Southern California junior high school graduation. I played Danny Boy instead, but it lit this fire. Mm-hmm. Not just to perform the piece and to share it. And what I really wanted to do specifically was share the kind of, totally visceral experience that I had listening to Mr. Fonville play this. I wanted to embody that, and I wanted to give that experience to audiences. And
just momentarily, just so we're sort of filling in the audience that is watching us right now, can you explain just the actual meaning of the title Density 21.5?
Density 21.5 is the density of platinum, and the piece was written for the inauguration, if you will, of one of the world's first platinum flutes on the market.
Right.
And so, what that means beyond the density of a metal mm-hmm. is the density of an instrument that one thinks of as the stereotypically light and frivolous and lyrical and one could say feminine instrument. And Density 21.5 is like, no. I am flute, hear me roar.
Yes, very nice.
And, uses the entire range of the instrument. It was
right.
It was the first piece. And it busted open the imaginations of composers, of performers, of improvisers, rethinking what this little tube of metal could do.
Right.
From the bottom notes to the absolute screeching top notes, pianissimos, fortissimos. It's 4.5 minutes of music. I mean, it's 2 pages.
Right.
But an opera happens within those 4.5 minutes. And I think of it, less like a piece, like a composition, and more, it's like an anthem.
Right. And kind of like, you just said opera. It is like a dramatic monologue with a shape and an arc and an intensity all its own. It's interesting to me, too, that that you're talking about having this experience at a very early age and being so profoundly moved by Varese. I had actually the very same experience, and it was also Varese. It was the percussion piece Ionization, because as a budding percussionist in junior high school, I just thought, who does that? How do you do that? I want to do that. And, ultimately it was not the career path that I took, but it was one of those profound turning points where you rethink what it is that you know about your own instrument.
Yeah.
So this has also led you to something that, you don't do things by half measures. A 22-year cycle of commissioning new works for solo flute and not just solo flute, Density 2036. What set you on this journey?
Well, I mean, you could say the journey started when I was 13 in that flute lesson.
Okay.
When the roof was blown off of my imagination, and has continued through Ice's work, commissioning and collaborating and co-creating works with composers, specifically with composers in our generation, and even more specifically than that, with composers that we feel are marginalized unfairly and who are underrepresented for any number of reasons.
Right.
And so that drive to create and collaborate on the creation of a new body of repertoire that's been the through line for me since that flute lesson, and it's absolutely the through line for this organization that I'm so privileged to be a part of. And so I think of Density 2036 as just an outgrowth of that. And it's a formalization of a very natural process. I would say an unstoppable process.
Right.
That's been happening all along. It's like that's the current. And so we like parameters as artists, right? It's nice to put an end date on a project, and it seemed like the 100th anniversary of this gem would be the appropriate marker to say, okay, I'm going to put the stake in the ground in 2036. And commit myself every year to creating a new program leading up to that. And the only rule that I've given myself beyond those parameters is that I can't repeat collaborations, and
Okay.
and that I'm pushing myself and all the people that I'm working with on the project to constantly be expanding the language of the instrument, and to not get in any kind of aesthetic or stylistic rut.
How far in advance have you planned right now? Which program are you working on in your head right now, for instance?
I mean, I'm programming right now through 2021.
Okay.
And this upcoming cycle, the 2017 cycle, features a collaboration with Marcos Balter and Doug Fitch. It's a 90-minute experience, we're calling it.
Mm-hmm.
An opera of sorts for solo flute, electronics, and mass community participation.
Okay, so that would be actually the Pan project that we saw part of
We
already.
saw a little
itty bitty piece of it.
excerpt of it yesterday, but it will be by October. It will be a 90-minute immersive work. So that's the latest.
And when you've done that the piece Death of Pan in other circumstances, is that also extracted from this larger?
It is. That's
There
the
we
first
have
4
it.
minutes of the opera.
The first 4 minutes.
It's the first 4 minutes.
You want to talk about dynamic drive? I mean, if I got up there and tried to do that piece, I don't know if I'd have energy for the remaining 86 minutes. I mean, that's
well, the kicker
pretty...
is that Doug wants me to do that opening hanging upside down, because it is, of course, the death of Pan. It's after Pan loses a musical duel with the god Apollo. How dare you challenge a god? And
Doug would ask you to do that.
Pan's punishment is that he's flayed alive. So we begin with the end.
Okay.
And it is both a death and a birth. And so presumably I'm going to hang upside down playing those 4.5 minutes of music.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, I should say Doug Fitch is an extraordinarily imaginative, outside-the-box thinker, stage director. He's based in Brooklyn. He's done work with a lot of major New York institutions, and Ice and Claire are among the people with whom Doug has worked. So that's something we'll very much be looking forward to. That's actually a very good segue back into the Density program that we just heard, which was sort of an adapted version of Density 2016, which I had the privilege of seeing 3 times, once in rehearsal and twice in performance in December in New York City at the Kitchen. It was an extraordinary experience for any number of reasons, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation. So I simply want to ask you, there was something different, specific about this year's program. Could you talk a little bit about what you were looking for in the pieces on 2016?
Yeah, I decided to put the flute in dialogue with other forces. Since we're making up the rules of this project as we go along, we just decided to expand from solo flute and electronics works. And I worked with a team of composers to come up with solo versions of pieces that were inherently collaborative.
Right.
So there are solipsistic versions of each of the pieces that you heard yesterday, but in almost all of the cases, the composers that I was working with are these tremendous performers as well. I mean, there's these incredible hybrid artists.
Right.
And so having them on stage with me, not just through their music, but having them physically on stage with me, playing with me, was one of the most gratifying experiences of my life. I mean, being on stage with Tyshawn yesterday and playing his piece, it's the happiest place for a flutist.
Sure, absolutely. And as you were saying, there are tongue-tied solipsistic versions of all of these, so that would account for the version of Suzanne Farron's piece that you played.
Exactly, yeah. So the piece was originally for Onde Martineau and glissando flute. The first piece ever for this combination of instruments, and we think the first piece ever for flute and Onde Martineau.
Right.
But Susie made a wonderful high-definition recording so that I could play it with her spiritual presence, recorded presence,
right,
and not with her physical presence. Of course, I prefer doing it with her in the flesh.
Sure.
But she was very much here in spirit yesterday.
Right, absolutely so. And then the piece that you do with Pauchi Sasaki, she was here. She collaborated. She had her violin, and you had the speaker dresses. It was a slightly adopted version from the indoor version that I saw in New York as well.
Yes. Well, we had 2.5 days of tech time at the kitchen,
right,
and a director and a space that could be completely blacked out. We had exactly 2.5 hours of tech time here, and we're doing it in the midst of this glorious sunshine in Ojai. So dramatically, it's a completely different experience, and we decided to just go with that. You know, rather than trying to recreate what we did in December, we just created a different show with the environment here yesterday. And so Pauchi's piece, which really it rests on control of the lighting and projections and a darkened space. We completely reimagined it here under sunlight.
That's right.
And I really enjoyed the experience. And she is, of course, an absolutely astounding artist on so many different levels. And it's a privilege to share the stage with her. And her energy on stage is it's extraordinary.
Absolutely. So then there were two more pieces on the, well, actually 3 more pieces if you include the Varese itself. But there were 2 more pieces that I remember specifically from the indoor version in New York. One of those, of course, Richard Baudouin's piece, involved a vocal octet, and thus, presumably could not have been done this time, which is why you brought in the excerpts from Marcos's piece. And that too, I mean, thematically, you couldn't have tied it in better. She ended this piece surrounded by actual audience members who were participating and making music along with her. It was really an extraordinarily moving sight that also worked extremely well aesthetically as a piece of music. So well done, you, Marcos. And then there's the piece by 2017 Ojai music director Vijay Iyer, in which, in fact, nobody was on stage.
That's right. Vijay gave me a break. When he was writing the piece, he said, "Claire, send me some samples. I want, 2-3 minutes of mostly non-pitched material. Just improvise." He says, "Don't worry about recording it, fancy equipment. Just, GarageBand is fine." And so I sat down in my apartment and I had half a beer, and then I thought, okay. I think I got the muse, okay, and I put on the recorder, and I had 5 flutes laid out, and I just put on a little timer, and I did about 1 minute to 2.5 minute improvisation on each of the flutes, contra, bass, alto flute, piccolo, and actually 6 flutes. I did C flute and also a little ocarina.
Okay.
And then I just sent him an email with these files, and a couple days later, he came back with a version of what we heard yesterday, and he said, "I think I've got what I need, and I don't need you on stage for this one." And of course we worked that into the show, right? Because
sure.
In New York, I actually got dressed into the speaker dress on stage with a team of helpers,
right?
And we did that backstage this time, and just used that as transition material. And it was, I have to say, it was so wonderful to hear that piece on this sound system.
Oh, yeah.
And hear it outdoors, and, we've got all these bird interpolations that happen here. It was just marvelous.
Yeah, the bird interpolations worked really well, and also it's an incredibly funky piece. I mean, this piece has a groove you could literally dance to. I'm
Absolutely.
sure some people did.
Yeah.
So ICE has been kind of, in a way, a house band here, and you've been performing in a lot of different circumstances. You were over in the gazebo this morning for Mario Diaz de Leon's piece, and 2 days ago was the Felipe Lara piece, and oh, help me, I just had a
George
senior
Lewis.
moment. The George Lewis piece, Emergent, which is a tremendous piece that it's fluid in electronics and a really, really big impact. And you were also involved yesterday in Anthony Braxton, the Ghost Trance music.
Yes.
So a wide variety of things in the morning programs on the Gazebo. And then as a part of ICE, you've been involved in concerti and in a conduction and so many different things. Talk to me a little bit about your Ojai experience and the magic of this place.
Oh, it's a love fest. Being here, there's nothing like it in the world. There's no festival like this. There's no staff like this. There's no director. And Vijay is, of course, what he's done with the festival this year is absolutely extraordinary. But Tom's work as the puppet string puller and mastermind and the connector of so many traditionally disparate forces is it's second to none. And so being here as a musician, I mean, we work very, very hard, obviously.
Yes.
But I really enjoy shifting gears from sitting in the middle of an orchestra, playing second flute, being in the middle of Taishan's experience today.
Right.
I wouldn't even call it a concert. It was an experience.
Yes, it was.
It was a heightened state of aliveness and danger for exactly 70 minutes. I mean, what he did was, he's
Taishan's
incredible.
piece, a conduction, was literally what that word would seem to imply, a conducted improvisation in which he was giving pre-decided signals and showing signs to the players, but all of the content was actually being generated on the spot. And I had heard 2 previous rehearsals, and none of these 3 iterations sounded in any way alike.
Yeah, it's a really, really amazing experience to be up there with him. And he gives us so much energetically and in every way. I mean, he's one of a kind. But the experience here, I love the shifting back and forth between these roles, and I love being a side woman and then being in the center and then being in the back of the orchestra. And then I love, just as much as any of these things, just sitting in the audience,
right, stretching
out on the lawn. I don't want to miss a single thing. We have to take naps every now and then and shove some power bars in our faces, but I don't really want to stop. And tonight I get to sit back and listen to most of the first concert, which is a huge privilege.
There was one more very special thing that happened yesterday, which was that you found yourself sitting in a chair on stage alongside Taishan and also George Lewis and Roscoe Mitchell and Muhal Richard Abrams, 3 of the foundational members of the Association for the Advancement of Creative Music, the AACM from Chicago. And you very, very eloquently summed up the International Contemporary Ensemble's debt to the AACM. I wonder if you could recap that for people who might have missed it.
Well, in short, I cannot fathom ICE, the project, the idea. I can't fathom the collective ethos without the example of the AACM. And I think that that's true of every young organization. Whether they're conscious of that or not.
Right.
That legacy is totally inside of our musical bloodstream. And to sit on that stage with them was, of course, intimidating.
Sure.
But I just savored every second of it, and we were all hanging on their every word. But the influence that they've had, I wish I could find a word that is more powerful and more ineluctable than influence, because it's deeper than that. There's nothing like the story that they have created, and that continues to evolve and continues to inspire and regenerate. And it's a spiritual practice, the way that Muhal describes it, and he lives it.
It absolutely
is.
It's
not dogma. It is a practice.
It is. When I was sitting with Muhal and Roscoe here just earlier today, I said, in a very real sense, what we're seeing all around us at this Ojai Festival is a world that they predicted and a world that they enabled. And we're all living it, and we're all fortunate to be partaking of what Claire is giving us at the festival, what Vijay Iyer is doing as a performer, as a composer, as a conceptualist, as a public intellectual. We are all the beneficiaries of it.